honored to be here. And Brian and I had probably one of the funnest prep calls I've ever had, because this is such a new topic and one that we're finding is absolutely mission critical at the CEO level. And I've never seen a topic grow this quickly or have this level of importance. And so we're truly enjoying this. And Brian, I think that when you're going into people's offices and you're meeting them for the first time, they must be like, wow, this is a problem I've been trying to solve for many years, and we didn't know that there was a solution to this. Is that what you're finding, or what are you seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. That is exactly it. And pleasure to be on with everyone. Really excited to talk about this particular topic at this particular time, because of the trends we're seeing. Very topical, given we're 2 weeks away from Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and the holiday season. But that's exactly it. I've been at Bynder 8 years, so I've seen the growth not only of the company but of the space. And what I've seen is, it has really evolved from, those who are on the call that are in brand, in e-commerce, in a content practitioner type role will know that the space has really evolved from maybe a nice tool for marketing or a way for creatives to get organized to really a strategic platform and a boardroom consideration. How are we going to go to market in the digital first economy? How are we showing up for our customers and driving loyalty, driving outcomes, be it enabling user communities or driving e-commerce sales, or there are countless others that we'll probably get into in this conversation. And so that's why our vision is inspiring brands to thrive through exceptional content experiences. And you'll hear me say that, consistently throughout, this session, because that is what I believe. That's what we at Bynder wake up every day aspiring to provide for our customers, and our entire community. So yeah, super excited. Let's get into it.
All right. So I know that we've talked about kind of what this topic is, and I still remember I grew up in a world where, right, you don't swear and whatnot. Now it's like, oh my gosh, how can I say the name of this digital asset manager, right? I'm like, oh damn, right? Like it's a really interesting topic, and it's one that I think nobody's really thought about, kind of where their digital assets are, how to organize them, the impact it has on the business, but also, right, if you want to give access to store personnel to post, if you want to give access to your C-suite to post, and when people sometimes, right, I mean, this is what we've seen. I think this is why it's become a CEO level conversation, right? You're in the heat of the moment. You're at an event that your company's doing. You want to kind of tell the world. You want to make sure you're using the right asset at the right time, and maybe you can kind of walk us through. I love this infographic. Maybe you can walk us through this, Brian, and just how Bynder thinks about it, and what the relevance is to today's executive.
Absolutely. I mean, everybody on the call will have some idea in their head of what does their, let's say, content life cycle look like, right? The create side, or maybe what we would call upstream, into manage, which is kind of in the middle, and what that's where DAM kind of starts and then sort of cascades out from. And then the delivery side, in terms of, well, where is all that content going, and at what point does it touch the customer? And you may have in your head a messy diagram, or so a lot of crisscrossing lines, or is it simple, or is it streamlined? And what we see really is our customers are leading the charge. They're very innovative. They have established Bynder as the true enterprise system of record for content, which is no small thing, right? You have to break down content silos. You need to unite assets. You need to go to areas of the business that are maybe operating independently or on their own and say, hey, we really have a way to, basically own the management side. Because what we say is, when you own the management truly, when assets are united, not in duplicate folders, not in silos because of one business unit doing their own thing, not half of them over at your agency and the other half over in-house. When you truly own the management, now you have the right to really master the delivery and really do delivery at scale, whether that is to your user community, think partners, distributors, agencies, press, and so on. No brand is an island, right? Every brand operates in a vast network of those stakeholders and those communities that need to bring that brand to market. So delivery really means enabling those user communities or delivering assets to systems, which is of course where assets are going directly to some downstream application. Like we have sort of the MarTech integrations there as a core component. So think e-commerce, think marketing automation, think content management system or product information management system for a lot of retail, right? So you're delivering and feeding assets to those systems that then further create and enhance a content experience. And that's when you create the customer engagement. That's when you create customer loyalty, boost conversion rates, targeted content at scale that hits on, personalization and all those sort of core pillars of success in the digital first economy.
Yeah, I mean, as we move forward and we look at kind of the size of this industry, can you help us understand, right? We hear a lot from CPGs how important it is to have the same visual, right, across different channels because it's much easier for the consumer to recognize it, which makes a lot of sense. And so that's question one. And then question two is how do, and this is important as we think about market sizing, if we go back in time, right? I think about us at Coresight, right? We've got video content, we've got photos from events, we've got, right, and they're all in different places, right, tagged differently. So when you think about the market size, is it what people have in their, kind of, more vintage, or is it kind of as they're moving forward, and how do you think about kind of harmonizing all of that?
It's probably both. And that also depends, like a lot of CPG brands do have a sort of a legacy component or a rich history, right? If they were founded, hundreds plus years ago. So there is an element of that, right? You're going to want all of your content since the inception of your brand, let's say, somewhere. So if you ever want to run a retro campaign, you have it. But really, I also think of it, Deborah, as like, okay, only going forward, what is the volume and variety you're going to need in 2025? Because that has also been the explosion of content. We call it the proliferation of content, which if you're not careful, then creates content chaos, as we call it. And managing that, wrangling that is super important. I do believe a lot of organizations have maybe overlooked that or not quite, fully embraced, the downstream benefits of doing that. And one of the drivers of the growth of, the damn space, if you want to call it that, or really just the demands that organizations have for this is now the expectation to deliver targeted content to all of your segments, right? We've all seen those campaigns that use the same exact image 100 different ways, and it gets very stale, very tired. And we see situations where, yes, you have all this customer data, that's great, but if you don't have the volume and variety of assets to deliver to them to then make that content experience relevant, make that promotion relevant, then it kind of falls flat, right? Like, what good is it knowing that you've got a segment of customers that are first-time home buyers if you're not serving them up, what is a picture and a message around, your first home purchase, right? If you're a kind of a mortgage company or a real estate company. So that is sort of where I go to is the targeted content experiences are no longer a nice to have.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, right? As a dog owner, when I get messages for cats, which I like all animals,
Right.
but you're kind of like, they don't know me, right? And I think that and then going back to, a consistency of image in my mind is the ability to recognize that it is that brand, because sometimes, right, we can see them go very far afield and you don't recognize the brand in different channels. And so I think there's really kind of this content chaos, which I think that's a phenomenal way to describe it, right? At the going back to at a senior level in the organization, how do you want your brand to represent across channels?
Yep.
And also, how do you enable the consumer not to have to work too hard to be able to identify, but without it becoming stale? I mean, I would say that, like, some of the numbers as we look at the market size, well, right, the data is the data. In my heart, right, as I talk to, and I feel like 2025 will be a bit of a breakout year because, right, the number of channels and the importance of these and the importance of, different types of mediums is growing at a pace I think that we can't ultimately, right, we can predict, but I think, you always want to be a bit more conservative, but it does seem, and it's truly ageless, what's happening in terms of how people kind of really consume content. So how do you, as you look at the numbers and the growth,
Mm.
where do you think we will see ups? I mean, right, as a former, well, analyst, Wall Street, right, still an analyst, but where do you think we'll see upside surprise?
Yeah, I think you have to first talk about AI, but in two maybe distinct ways. One is responsible use of it and practical applications where you're able to basically supercharge your productivity as it pertains to content creation, content management, content delivery, right? That's what we believe. Then there's also going to be an element of, if you think of Gen AI, whatever you like to imagine that of in 2024 and 2025, a lot of organizations are going to embrace that. There's no doubt about that. But when I talk about management across the enterprise and true, concepts of governance, control, and productivity, okay, well, you've created all of these images, or all this content from Gen AI. Do you know how to properly sort of organize, sort, and filter it? And what happens when you need to do an audit and understand what was enhanced or created by Gen AI versus what was not? There's another layer there of content chaos if you're not careful or if you don't embrace these core, pillars of digital asset management. So I think that those are the two ways to think of AI. And then I also believe that there's just a lot of cool, I don't know, campaigns or brand activations or stories coming down the road. For example, we had a customer in the fashion space say that, okay, Gen Z really wants to know how things are made. They want to know about the craftsmanship, the sustainability, where are the materials sourced. Are we doing anything with reusing or sort of like, recycling our materials? And so I'm like, wow, like, you know, product information and the product story maybe wasn't as exciting, but now it is because there's a whole new story to tell on TikTok or on some channel that maybe we didn't think about 5 years ago, all around the product, which is kind of cool, right? Because product information and metadata is now kind of like, there's a whole kind of new story to tell, which I think is super interesting.
I think that you hit on something that's really critical is consumers want to know, right, what's also happening after the useful life of the product. And so it was interesting. I went shopping. I was home for all of like a day this weekend and I needed some new shoes. I won't talk about brands or anything. But I was like, well, certainly, right, if I bring in my old shoes, right, like I'll get some kind of 15% discount, right? Like just kind of knowing. So I'm like literally lugging my old shoes into the store and they didn't do that. And I will say as a consumer, it wasn't that I wanted the 15% off. It's more that I wanted to know, okay, I no longer, these shoes are worn out to a point that like they're not really wearable. So what is this brand doing to, to take these to their next hopefully useful life?
Yep.
And so I think that brand story, right? And so it goes back to I think that this idea that the use cases, right? It's like it's sales, it's product, it's customer service, right? It's really gotten much broader
Yep.
than, and I was on the board of a PIM company a decade ago that was acquired. So I mean PIM, I know I have a lot of depth, but to me, I don't think back then we could have ever seen how things were really going to, you know, grow and the way that they have. And that's why I feel like the numbers for 2025, right? We may be underestimating. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think that consumers, we developed this like core AI framework and it's sustainability is like in the center. It's the idea that everything people are doing, and maybe they realize that maybe they don't, but they are ultimately shopping and living in a more sustainable way. And they're doing it in a way that impacts them. And that goes back to what you talked about with stories. And that's where I think, right, you need to find the story that works for you
Mm-hmm.
in each of these brands. And so that's
100%.
why I think we have more and more and more content and we have more information about each customer. And, a customer of a certain age in a certain demographic may look very similar to a customer that lives in another geography and is at a totally different age. And that information, I think, is what you're able to kind of pull together and
100%. Yep.
ultimately help these brands, right, really not only succeed, but exceed their own internal expectations.
Absolutely.
And so I think we're at a really exciting place right now. This is probably one of my favorite infographics we've ever done. It I mean, it was one of those things I first saw it and I've had it in my mind's eye ever since I did. So congratulations to our innovators team, to Stephen and to Manik, because this takes something so complex and simplifies it in a way that I think you can talk about it throughout the organization. So yeah, there's a lot of right, there's a lot of emphasis on this kind of consistent yet personalized content. I think we've talked about this. How do you think kind of this making this more strategic helps brands and retailers achieving that goal of delivering, right, exceptional content experience, but consistent, right? That's the challenge here.
Yeah, I think brands are starting to think about it less about marketing or less about, let's say, a campaign where, okay, your only goal is to say, let's promote it or maybe drive one stage of the funnel, if you want to call it that, or one metric to this is really how they want to go to market. And it has to touch everything. And so a good example would be, we had our first, our inaugural customer conference 2 months ago in September. And one of the customer showcases that we did was Amazon. And of course, that's sort of a major foundational player in retail and e-commerce, right? And how they're using the platform is not just to sort of store and then distribute out all of the promos around Prime Day and all of the brand identity around Prime Day, though they're doing that as well. They're also enabling the user community of warehouse operators and all of those along the supply chain and distributing out guides on how protocol needs to change because of the increased volume around Prime Day. So when we talk about delivering content out to all of your user communities, that is how far it can go. Content needs to be consumed, whether it's in PDF, in video, right, instructional, in anything else, by any number of touch points in your enterprise, and it can really all come from the same place. So that is a great example of like, sure, they had some Prime Day ads as any campaign or any initiative will have, but it by no means stopped there. It extended out to all of these different groups, making Prime Day, the billion and billion-dollar sort of event that it is.
I mean, I think in retail, oftentimes there is this concern around, they're running legacy infrastructure, right? Everyone's thinking about headless and being more agile, but there is the reality right now where we're still in the midst of a lot of that. How does DAM kind of connect, integrate with some of these legacy structures? And when you have silos, how does it help maybe break some of those down?
Yeah. Again, at our user conference, 2 months ago, we did a whole session on breaking down content silos, and we have a whole kind of prescriptive approach to identifying, breaking them down, what is the benefit, and so on. If anyone was interested, but really, think about why inefficiencies exist when it comes to your content creation, management, or delivery. Silos really happen for one of two reasons. One, you're siloed in business units. Okay, the B2C or the D2C team is not playing nicely with the wholesaler or retail enablement team, and they're starting to create their own stuff or operate in their own way, right? So across business units and teams is where silos can exist. The other is across platforms, meaning, okay, you're using an e-commerce platform or you're using a marketing automation platform, you're uploading content directly for that and just leaving it there. And that kind of builds up silos over time, because then there's no cross-channel utilization, or then there's no reuse and repurpose, which is a huge initiative and topic within marketing leaders right now, right? How do we get more reuse and repurposing of the content we do have, such that we don't have to always go create net new every single time we need something? And so again, it's the silos exist in systems. Okay, well, we can break those down, right? You want to integrate, you want to have everything flow from the DAM as the system of record, such that it is then also accessed across all of those platforms that I said. Because at the end of the day, the DAM is really the only platform in the MarTech stack that is universal, or that every team needs to touch at some point, or at least have an integration or a sort of like a means of accessing content. Otherwise, you're only thinking of it in a lens of like, oh, well, the social team is using, either their social channels or, you know, the sprinklers, sprouts, Hootsuites of the world, and they're only you putting content into that. Well, what happens when that same exact image needs to then go on a brochure or, you know, in some other iteration? So that is where I think enterprises are really starting to see the light, is like, oh, wow, okay, there's a way to eliminate all of that. And think of, if you just did that, the operational efficiency you then introduce, which then of course is only beginning to get to the sort of value chain, because really what you're doing is getting to market faster and delivering more exceptional content to your customer segments, which is more of the strategic side, let's say, or affecting the top line.
Yeah, I mean, I thought your comments earlier about, governance and reducing risk by limiting manual tasks was very interesting. And do you have any examples you can share with us as well?
Yeah, one is, you know, I won't mention the brand because this is sort of a moment where they had to scramble a little bit, but they one brand did a campaign where they played off of, it was in the state of Virginia, and they played off of the old saying, like, Virginia is for lovers. And long story short, they got a lot of complaints, including from like the you know, the state of Virginia itself. So they had to pull that campaign, right? Didn't want to make anybody else upset. They were able to do that in, you know, hours, because everything is sort of, you know, you do a quick content audit. Okay, where do all of these assets show up? What is tagged and categorized to Virginia or to this campaign or to anything else? And then it was like, okay, no problem. You know what I mean? Like, how long would that take if you didn't have a mechanism to quickly audit and have that sense of governance? Well, you'd probably be in hot water. And the same goes for, you know, so many retail brands, fashion brands, and so on have such strict and nuanced usage rights, or, you know, collabs, endorsements, influencer content, so on, so on, so forth, where it can get very intricate very quickly. Okay, like, for how long and in what manner are we allowed to use this content? And let's be honest, if that's in, you know, file storage or, you know, some legacy system, there's no way you have the usage rights as well as the content access, as we call it, request to download, embargo, and so on and so on and so on. There's no way to manage all of that. And so that's kind of the less exciting side, you know, but that is really what sets your brand free. That is what allows brands to go to market confidently, quickly, you know, and have some fun with it, because they've got the baseline figured out of, you know, in what manner can we use all of this content with our partners, with our celebrity endorsers, or anything else?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I just want to reach out to the audience. We have a lot of questions in the queue, which I'm going to ask a few right now. But please, as we're talking, please just add your questions and we'll get to them. So Brian, I just want to take a minute because they're
Sure.
they're building up rapidly. So this is from Michael. How does managing video assets look like within a DAM platform?
Sure. I will give you a couple examples or ways to think of it. Well, first and foremost, you know, like Bynder, like in terms of not only video storage, but video playback, previewing, is all sort of, that's core. But then lately we've introduced some really cool functionality using AI, such as speech to text, or any video, you'll be able to then auto generate a transcript and search on it, which has been really impactful for our customers, right? I do it myself. If I've got a video, you know, I remember someone said something, I can't remember where it was, but you use this sort of speech to text feature, you find that timestamp pretty instantly. But then you'd want to consider it across, okay, well, what are your uses of video? And is that a lot of short form, let's say TikTok clips, a lot of B-roll that then is going to make it into your final videos? There's also an element of the platform that we call content operations, where, you know, anyone can use templates for videos to then, you know, establish certain elements, such as the beginning card, the end card, grabbing small clips. And that's what, you know, all of a sudden you're creating video at scale without having to make a request of your videographer. That is super important. And then when it comes to raw video, you know, or work in progress, that's kind of up to you, right? If you want to store that in the DAM, or if you want to more create a workflow, which many of our customers have embraced, where all usable and final video, irrespective of the length of it, is now in the DAM, so it can be further manipulated, adapted, and so on to then deliver downstream.
Very cool. All right. That's a great answer. Another question. Are enterprise companies better positioned to benefit from DAM solutions versus smaller retailers? And that's from Stephanie.
I wouldn't necessarily say so. I mean, you know, some of the innovative uses of our platform have come from, let's say, multi-brand, multi-market, you know, like on the larger side type of houses of brands, right? Because now you're sort of housing not just one brand worth of content, but you're creating a system and hierarchy where each brand within a, let's say, portfolio uh, can, you know, achieve these benefits, can go to market quickly, can engage, you know, with exceptional content experiences. But honestly, a smaller brand typically is, let's say, more reliant on key channels like selling on Instagram, right? Or their Shopify instance is super important because they only have a handful of employees and maybe they aren't distributed more broadly across markets or in, you know, certain retail channels. And so it's like when I say exceptional content experiences, you know, a smaller retail brand has to be exceptionally exceptional, and they're telling more of a brand story, right? It's everyone remembers those, you know, the darlings of Instagram that came up through the years. Many of them now Bynder customers, right? In whatever space it was, the mattress brands or the sneaker brand, you know, or the anything else that you would put in your home. It's just as important. So I think there's a totally a use there, and that's why the platform is scalable, right? You're not going to want the same exact configuration that PepsiCo or Amazon have, but you're going to want one that's a little bit simpler to start and then can scale with you as you grow.
That makes a ton of sense. Another question, then we'll get back to our deck. So this is from Allison. What are some of the KPIs a brand retailer should consider for evaluating ROI on their damn investments?
Sure. So maybe I will start at the customer touch points and work backwards. Conversion rates, because for example, if you think of a PDP, product detail page, the more variety of imagery you're serving up and the more, you know, you're able to update that quickly and on all of your channels, Amazon, Target, you know, Walmart, so on, so forth, the more you're able to keep that fresh. There are the studies out there, right, that is what converts more. We have some customers where, you know, they'll run the tests, right? And if they're delivering 10 varieties or angles of a product shot versus 5, of course, the one with more information on there, both visual as well as product information, it's going to tend to convert more. But then I also think of, you know, one of the core components of our platform, we call it content experiences for omnichannel, is transforming dynamically the image as it's delivered to a web page, which does also boost page load speed, which then has implications on SEO rankings. So in a highly competitive market, you know, those crucial increments in terms of, you know, website performance or SEO performance, you know, you can do the math in terms of, okay, well, if you're able to increase that by 1%, what does that mean for your total sales or your total engagement, right? And the same can be said for email campaigns, right? In terms of volume and variety of imagery. If you're able to serve that up quickly and oftentimes dynamically based on segment, what implications would that have for your email performance or whatever other metric you're trying to generate, such as, you know, clicks to your e-commerce or total, you know, conversions on a promotion, for example. And then you have to also think about if more of what we would call operational or more like the savings you're trying to generate. Can you avoid maybe an FTE hire? Are you able to quantify in hours how many hours you just saved by making more content available or reusing more assets, enabling self-serve, which many of our customers do? A lot of them do know the hourly rate of their creatives, of their, you know, e-commerce or any other type of professionals. And then it's like, okay, you do the math on a monthly or annual basis, that starts to be pretty compelling, pretty fast. And then the last would be, in terms of ROI, being very strategic and smart with the new content you are commissioning, because you're completely taking off the table this idea of duplicating efforts or, you know, bogging down your creative team with small, simple requests to resize or put this in a new color or, you know, change the dollar sign to a euro sign. That should be self-serve for your entire enterprise user community, by the way. And if it isn't, then that is a great place to start. So then, you know, your content investments are much more strategic and you're able to protect those investments, you know, at a much higher rate.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so talking about the numbers, you know, our research showed that companies can save an average of $33,000 per employee in labor hours who are involved in DAM related activities, including creative, marketing, e-com, and branding teams.
Yep.
Can you shed more light on how exactly a DAM platform helps with cost savings to such an extent? And maybe once again, if there's case studies to help our audience understand the real impact.
Yeah, so what you're looking at here is almost like a little bit of a progression, right? Like on the right, on the left here, this first sort of category is almost like off the bat, let's say, or there was a question on the smaller size brand, right? If you are a upstart retail brand, or you're just getting started on Shopify, on Instagram, building some brand awareness, word of mouth, like 33,500 in savings is material, right? And that's just simply by creating those efficiencies. Again, eliminating work that was typically just wasted on finding an image, delivering an image, tweaking an image, let's say. And then you kind of progress to more of thinking of it in terms of all of the work you've eliminated across that life cycle, including delivering downstream, right? Think about all of the updates. Anyone on the call here, if you're in an e-commerce or an online merchandising and digital storefront role, all of the kind of manual work that either you or someone on your team does, simply of setting up the digital shelf and setting up the digital storefront, right? You can take all of that off the table. Well, yes, that's operational savings, I suppose, but really it's just as important to think of the top line. Like I said, like what's that going to do for your customer experience, right? What's that going to do for when Amazon or some other large retailer changes their requirements, which they are known to do, very, very often? How agile are you? And then continuing to keep up, because I'd imagine if there are any brands on the call that are, selling their products on Amazon, it probably keeps you up at night. Like, where are those PDPs that aren't updated and in the right format? And Amazon said they might take down at some point, right? It's like, that's constant. So it's like, okay, if you can take that off the table, imagine the value there. And then again, if you go into the right, it's very common and to see savings, in the millions when it comes to looking at this across the enterprise, calculating your reuse and repurposing, as in what did you avoid in terms of content creation costs? Like, did you avoid a photo shoot? Did you avoid stock imagery purchase? Did you avoid, anything else? Hiring new freelancers. We all know what those cost. And then it's really, if you believe that there is a quantifiable cost to your time to market, which is also what our customers see, right? We have some customers in retail and in fashion and apparel that say that content releases that used to take 2 weeks now take 2 days, right? So if a seasonal campaign is only relevant for so long per the nature of a seasonal campaign, what does 12 more days in market mean for you? So that is really what I like to think about.
You bring up so many points that I've personally lived through. We've in the past hosted this 10/10 shopping festival, and we'd have to get a huge amount of images up in a very short period of time. And we were working with many different brands and retailers across categories, and just some of the challenges that we faced. And, you know, because everything was, towards a specific date, going back to this kind of 2 days, 2 weeks thing, I've lived it. I understand the value. And you could see, right, some of these companies who they also really understood the value. They just didn't know what they could do in terms of looking out to a partner. And so I think this whole idea of, right, as we think about the full potential of AI being untapped, like what are the true benefits? Like, what do you see in the organization? Do you see reduced turnover? Do you see, people who are happier in their jobs? Do you like what is the going from like the tactical to the strategic?
Mm-hmm.
What do you see? Of course, like ROI, returns have to be higher, but what are some of the softer things that you see?
Yeah, unlocking creativity, because you know we don't have it on here, but it falls into several of these categories: content reuse, speed of content creation. Part of Bynder's AI search experience is what's called similarity search. And
Hmm.
so if someone who's creating content, now that could be a marketer or it could be a creative, they're like, oh, I like this image and I'm wondering what else we have that is conceptually similar to it so that I can have more variety, but I also don't have to go either create or find elsewhere, on Getty or, maybe on a photo shoot or something. Similarity search will tell you the what else do you have in the DAM with one click that is conceptually similar. So now you kind of have this inspiration board based on what you originally liked, and then you can just go from there, because again, you know that what are the usage rights on it, and so on and so forth. Where is it from? What campaign? What date? And then on that same vein is reverse image search. You can actually find an image anywhere on the internet and then drop it into the DAM, and the AI will tell you, well, what do we have that's similar? And do we have that exact image? Because sometimes that happens, right? There's probably people on the call that are like, yeah, I saw our product shot on a place that we did not necessarily agree to. Okay, well, what do you want to do with that? Prove it's in the DAM, prove it's yours. Do you want to take action? Do you want to and give them a new one or whatever? So it's like, reverse image search, similarity search, duplicate finder. These are all ways to enhance discoverability. And then from there, those who are in, sort of tasked with creating those exceptional content experiences just have much more, resources at their disposal to then go ahead and do that.
Right. So I think we have some conclusions on the page. As you've probably seen me, I've been taking some notes. So
Yep.
as I've gone through and seen, kind of some of the great unlocks here, right? This idea of, right, you can set your brand free, getting your baseline figured out, supercharging your productivity, really eliminating the content chaos. I think the speech to text is truly an unlock. Really kind of this idea of video at scale, right? Which we know so many companies are spending so much time and money,
Right.
right? That I think is huge. The idea of, right, avoiding the photo shoot, hiring freelancers, right? I mean, this is like, you can quantify that right now. And the idea of a content release in 2 days versus 2 weeks, giving more time for creativity. And I think the idea around similarity search and like the reverse image search, I mean, these are to me, I mean, it's hard to have just 3 takeaways. I think I had like 12 there, but that also shows you, right, kind of like where we are in this kind of life cycle, in this journey. So I know we have a few last questions,
Mm-hmm.
and so we've got two more. And once again, if anybody has any additional, please feel free to ask them. So we are challenged with AI in general. How does it extend to DAM platforms, and is it easy to use? And that's from Glenn.
Yeah, I would think of it first and foremost, where we started our whole strategy and where our entire approach and vision is going is what you might call sort of like non-controversial use cases or practical applications, because that is where a lot of organizations are starting, right? If there's a little bit of skepticism or, reticence around AI, you're not alone. But when it comes to, a model that does not really learn anything about you as a brand or an organization over time. It's simply enhancing your catalog or your sort of, system of record and generating the efficiencies and unlocking the creativity that I mentioned. That is where a lot of, you'd be surprised how open, legal teams are, or, executive teams are, when you can kind of position it that way, as opposed to, if you're leading with the generative AI piece, well, then there's probably going to be a level of like, well, what if the language comes across the wrong way? What if the image is not us and now it, spins out of control? No, I would start with, again, that responsible, practical approach, a lot around discoverability, a lot around supercharging your productivity by better managing all of the data, which at the end of the day, there's a ton of in the DAM around all of your imagery, right? So I don't know. Hopefully you think about it that way. Happy to work on it more with you, on a one-off if that was, of interest, but that might be a good place to start. And then, learning from your peers, like we've seen some great examples of our customers having a corporate AI strategy where marketing is one pillar and then kind of content is a pillar under that. That certainly gives you a leg up. But if your company's not there yet, I've also seen organizations basically use this as the starting point and kind of get people's attention in a non-controversial way.
Can I ask you a question? This
Yep.
is my question. So going back to what you just said, right, at your user summit customer conference, did you find, even with competitors, right, because your look and feel is so kind of specific to your brand, were they willing to kind of share best practices, learn from each other? Is this one of those? I mean, there's a few topics that are really ones where you can get people in a room and they're really willing to share, and so it improves the whole industry. Can you talk about that?
Sure, in terms of our competitors or different brands like that are
The
were present.
the brands who would be customers of
Yep, yep,
Bynder who are
yep.
competitors.
Right. Yeah, there are some instances, and you can probably think of off the top of your head, like the advertising wars in, like beer categories, soda categories, other big like CPG categories. Those they probably don't want to really
Right.
learn from each other, but you would be surprised how open, you know, if you are a fashion brand and you're talking to three other fashion brands, and even if you are competing for the same, customer on the same product, they want to know what each other are doing, right? And they want to
Yeah.
learn. They love, because Bynder is an incredibly visual platform, especially because we offer a lot of configuration around your brand colors, your brand fonts, and all that. So the show and tell aspect across customers is pretty tremendous to see. Well, how did you set yours up? Oh, okay. Well, this is how ours looks, and we've seen some truly impressive um, instances, or portals is what we call them, specifically on our what we call content experience for user community, because that has a very stylistic and configurable front end layer where you can basically create a brand site. You could think of it as brand guidelines meets your content curation center. Um, so that is super fun. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, they love the peer-to-peer learning. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, that's what I would have expected.
Yep.
And but to hear that it's actually the case, I think that starts to really change the industry, because if you can learn before you do, right? There's always a learning by doing, but if you can learn
Yeah.
before, I think you can really have much more of an impact, which is really what Binder's all about. All right, last question. This is from Craig. Content governance is amongst our major concerns. Can you explain how Binder helps with content governance?
Absolutely. I mean, that is core to Binder's DNA and identity, and core really to a true enterprise system of record. Um, you can think of it in two ways to start: governance at the user level, and then the second is at the content level. So at the user level, with advanced permissioning, your user groups really dictate who sees what, who accesses what, right? You don't want sales seeing everything that creative is working on, because then they're going to grab something for their presentation that is maybe still work in progress, and so on and so forth. Even down to externals like press agencies, partners, distributors, getting very granular on those permissions, even to the individual partner, so that when they log in based on what is tagged to them and so on, no one is seeing anything they shouldn't, but everything they should, right? So that's at the user level. We call that user permissions. And it can get very, very granular at the enterprise, but very simple if you're only looking to start out, right, with like, let's say, a couple user groups. The other side would be governance on the content side. So embargoing assets, for example, for a product launch where they're available, but not able to be shared or downloaded until the day of the product launch. And then automatically everything becomes available because now you have your product launched, you need to distribute those assets. Same goes for request to download, watermarking, different ways, expiration dates. If let's say you've signed a influencer, but only for a year. So after that year, all of those assets need to expire and be, archived and sort of put away, so to speak. So yeah, governance at the user level, governance at the content level.
That's really the watermarking is very interesting and something we've talked about more holistically than in terms of actually seeing them implement it. And so once again, as we think forward to 25, it's a very, I mean, Brian, I could talk for hours because this is such an interesting topic. And I know, like, I feel the pain of so many of our clients. And I mean, I'll be honest, right? We ourselves have it at Coresight as well. And so I just want to thank you for taking the time. What's the best way for people to reach you? Because like I said, I know this is such a huge unlock for them and such a huge opportunity.
Yeah, I would do two things. If this was at all interesting, or you want to keep talking about this exact topic, please find me on LinkedIn. That's a great way, specifically for myself, to understand like who was on the call, like what was interesting. But if you are more interested, like you're wondering about governance, wondering about AI, wondering about video, if you go to Bynder.com, we do have a sort of an experience that is more of a ability to chat with our employees. So just drop in there, hey, saw the session with Brian, want to learn more about video, and whoever answers it, I'll make sure to connect with them today, and then we can get you the information that you want. And then
Perfect.
I will be at the Coresight event in December. So if anyone is also planning on being there in person, I'd love to connect.
Perfect. We can't wait to see you. Thanks everyone for joining us, and truly thanks for taking the time to explain making the complex simple, because I think that's what it's all about, and really helping to drive ROI for all of us. So thank you, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.